What's up YouTube, and welcome back to another episode of Yev's M Problems. Today it's gonna be the M5. It never stops, dude. Let's do it. So a little while back I was driving my M5 and I noticed that the battery light came on. I didn't think much of it because at that time I was still doing my M3 subframe and rod bearings and all that, so the car was jacked up, and I thought, you know what, I'll figure this out later. Over time though, that light did turn into something else. Mainly I noticed when I was driving, the navigation screen would shut off, nothing would work, the sound would stop playing, the climate control would stop working completely, I couldn't do anything on this. The gas gauge would jump around, the car did start to overheat at a certain point, and eventually I connected the dots and I realized that as soon as all this happens, as soon as all this shuts off, I would run outside and I noticed that the auxiliary fan would stop working. As soon as that stops working, the car just starts to overheat. At first I thought it was my battery because this battery was very old. I bought a new battery, I checked the voltage showed to be about 13.8. I thought that's still fine. Didn't think much of it, got a new battery just because the battery was shot anyway. It was getting really old. Replaced that didn't help one bit. I started reading online, it turns out that the operating voltage for this car, for this M5, is a little over 14.5. I started connecting the dots and I'm pretty sure that the root of all evil in this case, of all these problems, is the alternator. It's not producing enough power, but it's producing enough power to keep the car running and kind of semi-charging the battery, because after overnight, the battery would just be shot and dead completely. I'd have to jump the car. I decided to get a new alternator and a new tensioner. So let's get to it, dude. First things first, when you jack up the car and secure it, those blocks are secure. Don't forget to disconnect your battery because, well, yeah, it's the right thing to do. You open up your hood, you're gonna want to remove this air box right here. This is the driver's side. Pop these guys off. There is one more clip right here on the bottom of it. There you go. This whole piece is now flexible. And then we are greeted with a 10 mil. This is out. What I like to do when I put these things away, and I, just so I wouldn't lose any bolts, I put the bolts back to where they belong. That way I did not ever lose them. But here we are, there's the alternator. Next up, we're gonna have to remove this clutch fan right here. We're gonna need a 1 1/4 inch open end wrench right there. So do you see those little bolts? This little guy, that little guy, there's 2 more, there's 4 total. What I enjoy doing, and it's a little bit easier on my E46 than this car, but you take a little flathead like this, you stuff it in there, in between the bolts and the actual pulley itself, and you pull the actual flathead this way and the wrench that way. That way it spreads like this, you pull them, and in essence this becomes loose. Since this is pretty much self-tightening, it never over-tightens itself. It's not too bad, but it just unscrews just like that. There you go. This fan is out. If this is your first time taking it out, I would suggest cleaning this little guy up of all sort of debris, just so it would actually be cooling off and not be clustered with a bunch of stuff, so clean it up. And right now, before we remove the actual serpentine belt, would be a good time to snap a photo of it. Of course, you can Google all this stuff and you can find it, and it's definitely much easier to see when you're under the car, but this is the belt tensioner right here. So remember the placement of the belt again, and you're greeted with a 15mm bolt. Make sure your ratchet is set to righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Get this belt loosened. Okay, just like that, the belt is removed, and I replaced mine not too long ago, so I'm keeping it. Once you're at the bottom of this, the best way to remove the alternator, in my opinion, is you got to remove this actual tension right here. All this is on one piece. What you're greeted with is a T50 Torx right up there. Make sure that the Torx socket is not too small or not too big, otherwise you're just going to strip everything inside. So right there, this bolt is out. But as you can see, this tensioner is still not completely removable. There's a little nut right there. The reason these belt tensioners tend to go out over time is because, well, look at that. It's hydraulic. Take a 13 mil and unscrew this little guy right there, and it should be able to just come right off. Boom. That little nut is off, and there is a little washer on right there. Order of operations, hydraulic tensioner, washer, nut. That's how it goes. For the time being, I'm just gonna put this washer and nut back on just so it wouldn't get lost. In my opinion, I think the best and easiest way to remove the alternator is if you first remove this power steering pump. If you don't know, I recently did a timing chain job on this S62. You could watch that right here. There's a whole series of it. It's quite interesting. And when I was down here, I had to remove the alternator for me to remove the front covers, the timing chain covers. It was very difficult to take this alternator off if this was in the way. So what you do is you take a 6mm Allen right here. There's gonna be a 6mm Allen bolt right there. there and one right there. And behind the power steering pump, there's gonna be one more 13mm bolt right there. In case you're wondering, original bolts are not gonna be 6mm Allens. That is just what I have because when I first got this car, this bracket was actually broken off. So put some new bolts in, got the bracket welded up, and now this power steering pump is held on better than it ever was. And this power steering pump is completely loose, and it gives us way more room to get that alternator out. And now what seems to be one of the easier parts is the alternator itself. It's only held on by 2 bolts. They're 2 16 mils, one right here and one right there. You remove those, and then we have to wiggle this thing out of there. There we go. Bottom one is out. Note that they are different lengths. The bottom one is longer than the top one. Take your handy dandy flathead and you pry this sucker off. Like so. Beautiful. Wow, that actually went a lot smoother than expected. Now that it's hung down, we gotta remove some wires from the back. As you see right there, we are greeted with a plug. Remove that. And it's easier to see, but along with the plug, right up top, there's gonna be a 17mm ground bolt. It's a pretty hefty one. It's right in the back, right over where the plug is. Unscrew that. The easiest way would be probably right here from the top. I don't have anybody spotting this, but it's probably about to fall off. That's the only thing that holds the alternator anymore. There you go. This is how that 17mm nut looks like. It's a big plastic nut. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, the alternator is removed. And at this point, it's actually very simple. It's all pretty much been reversed. This hydraulic piece right here, you take a 13mm, unscrew it, make sure that the new one that you apply, make sure it's facing the correct way because it says top open, whatever that means. Take this 13mm screw right here, unscrew it, replace this little guy, the hydraulic tensioner itself, and the rest is literally in reverse. So let's get it. So far, everything's going in pretty good, but the only difficult part that I've been struggling with for a few minutes now is that 17mm nut that we removed earlier for the ground. That's the only tricky part about this so far. It's just, it's angled a certain way, and you can't really get to it with 2 hands. You kind of have to lay the alternator down sideways like that. But you tighten that little nut right there, and dude, everything is cake. Remember, the super long one is on the bottom. Out of the 2 mounting bolts, the shorter one is up top. All right, alternator secure. Now let's put the power steering pump back on and we're good, dude. And with somebody else's help, you could do this in under a minute and put the belt back on. Super simple. The rest is even easier. It's the fan and the intake box, and that is pretty much it. And now, of course, we're putting the battery back on. 10mm, put it back on, and let's start her up. Let's give her first go. Hopefully the battery light turned off, and everything will be working at this point. So far, so good. No battery light, that is really good. Disregard this, I have no cats. We are good, dude. Everything's solid, the belt's tight. Nice. She's working like a dream, baby. So far, so very good. That's nice, this is beautiful. For us to know for sure if the alternator fixed my issue or not, you can put your voltmeter up on 20 volts right there. Put your positive on the positive, your negative on the negative, and boom. We got, our reading is 14.4. A minute ago it was 14.5. We got perfect charge. Here's the first drive. So far, so good. Not overheating, not doing anything crazy. Everything's working, the screen's working. Seat warmers are working. Exhaust is working. Yep, this thing ain't overheating, dude. We good. Dude, if you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe because we got a bunch of stuff coming, dude. This thing needs a lot of work. As you can see, I have no idea how fast I'm going. You know, that's great. Make sure to like and subscribe because, like I said, we have a lot of things coming, so stay with it. Peace.